I do want to show you one thing, and once I figured out how to get the template to work and show you that, I do want to show you one other little technique that we have figured out. And let me go there. And it was actually in Rob's email on Workplace last week. It is this: add a play button to your image. So the way we're going to do this little workaround is we're going to pick an image, say for example, this image. My bad, I want to go back to the screen that I was on before. So here's how you can choose a file to a photograph that's in your on your desktop somewhere. Say for example, I just picked this image, which just happens to be available. And I'm going to see how the play button comes in? So I just picked a picture that just happened to be on my desktop. I have now uploaded that image, and I've said I wanted one of these play buttons to appear in the middle. That has put it in there. I can now download this image. I've got it right here now on my desktop. And this is the image now with the play button in the middle that I can load into my eBlast and link it to a YouTube URL. And now I have my video embedded email automatically right then and there. Does that make sense to everybody? How you can do this now?
So it's added in addition to the video, or is it added as part of the video?
So this is technically just the image, but the
Right.
play button in the middle is what is key to have that image there to indicate to your viewer that it's not just an image, it's a link to a video. And so
Correct.
you import this image and then you link it to your YouTube video or your Vimeo video or whatever format you have. Does that make
So
sense?
you just choose it like the thumbnail for your YouTube video.
That's exactly right. You insert this
Oh, okay.
image into the template for your YouTube video, and then
Okay.
you link it with the URL.
Gotcha.
And next time I'll have the YouTube or the eBlast template set up on here to where it'll be an automatic thing for you. But the YouTube, this is the link that you need, and it's fbutube.com, fbutube.com, and it's the add a play button to an image module within this. Okay. How's everybody doing? All right. So I'm going to launch into my presentation that I was going to do, but we're going to do it real quick and real dirty because I'm questioning how applicable it is to everybody on the call, because nobody here seems to have a listing. But we're going to talk about it anyway because it's important to pricing and pricing of your listings. Okay. So what we are going to do today is we're going to talk about creative ways to sell your listings faster without a price reduction. These are some general ideas. I am doing this again today because we are now even higher number of active listings than we were before. So it means that there are listings out there that need to be sold. And this time of the year, it is critical to try to make sure that they are getting sold. And it's because it's a slower time of the year, it's even more important that we are making efforts to show to our sellers that we are going the extra mile to get their homes sold. All right, so we want to make sure that our listings are standing out amongst the competition, that a buyer would choose our listing versus someone else's down the street before they choose that one. Okay. Why a buyer's agent would choose to show your home today versus the 5 others that they could be potentially showing in the same town. Okay. And we want to ask the question why a buyer should be listing when there's new construction with builder incentives all over the place right down the road from them. Okay, so we have to go in there and we have to market with these things in mind. So having said that, let's talk about some things that we can do, creative ideas that will help us to get there. All right, a big one: have your seller contribute money towards the buyer's closing costs. And some of the recommendations that I've seen are anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 to $10,000. That's why I put the two X's in there, is because some people are saying as high as 10K towards buyer closing costs can make a big, big difference. So this will allow the buyer to buy down their interest rate using the 2-1 buy down potentially. Um, this of course is going to be paid at the settlement and flows through the title agency or the closing attorney. And this can significantly impact your client's payment, which is another thing we're going to talk about here in a minute, pricing more towards the payment than the price of the home. Okay. So a great way to do this is to have the seller contribute towards the buyer's closing costs. And if you were to do this, how would you do it? Where would you put this information that your seller is willing to pay towards contributing closing costs? Would you advertise it in the MLS?
Yes.
I would. Private remarks, put it all over the private remarks that you're willing to do these things. Okay, makes a big, big difference. All right. Next slide. So you can also have your seller pay for 1, 2, 3 years of HOA dues. Again, this would be paid from the seller's proceeds at the closing. If monthly HOA is $300, then 3,600 HOA credit for a year would be better than, in a lot of cases, be better than a $5,000 price reduction, because it would, it would affect their monthly budget for a whole year as opposed to $5,000, which is only once at the closing. Okay. So you perhaps do both a price reduction and an HOA credit, and do them both instead of the $10,000 price reduction on closing costs. Okay. Have your seller pay for 1 year of the property taxes for the buyer. Okay, this would also be paid at the closing by the seller out of their seller's proceeds. So it's money that they haven't really lost. It's never money that they have to stroke a check for. It's just a little bit less out of their proceeds, which they're probably, with the equity position that most homes are in these days, probably is a good thing. All right. And if that's too much, then have, perhaps maybe just a 6-month or a half the year credit would work. Again, all points of negotiation that show that you're making extra efforts to your seller and to the buyer and the buyer's agent that you're going the extra 9 yards to make the deal work. If your particular home has issues with condition, then consider an allowance to be escrowed at closing by the seller for the buyer. So they could do flooring or paint, or one of the most prevalent ones is polybutylene pipes. There are contractors out there, flooring, painters, plumbers, that will do work when the money is escrowed by the closing attorney and can be done after the closing. That's right, it can be negotiated, it has been negotiated, and it's always easy to do. Okay. The key is, if you've got a buyer that loves the house, don't let the condition of the house and some of the things that they want to do to it be the thing that stops the deal from going through. All right, be tenacious, be relentless. All right, you could also leverage the home warranty, and we've got a great home warranty program through America's Home Preferred. You know what? Home warranties in the big picture are pretty inexpensive, costing about $600 a year for a year of coverage. If in many markets, if it's not offered by the seller, for years, it's even asked for by the buyer, lest they lose in the bidding process. So obviously, if you're going to do this, you want to make sure your comments are the MLS comments reflect this incentive. Okay. Here's a big one. Love this one. Add a $1,000 commission bonus to the buyer's agent if it's pending by a certain date. The goal is you want to create a sense of urgency. So like in this scenario, if you're trying to get this thing done by the end of the year and you want to try to leverage on this market, you might want to say $1,000 broker bonus to the broker that brings a buyer that closes before January 15th.
Good morning.
Okay. So when you're doing any type of incentive like this with the commission bonus, or if you're going to, do any of these incentives that are going to take money away from the net, probably a good idea to have that seller's net sheet when you're adding any of these seller's concessions to the transaction, just to make sure that these numbers are not a surprise to your seller. But I'm going to tell you, most of these concessions will cost less than the price reduction to make the equivalent price reduction that would probably give you the same amount of leverage. So a lot of times these work a lot more effectively than just the price reduction. Okay. In this market, we're transitioning from a market where we were doing a lot of waiving of inspections and waiving of contingencies. This particular bullet point on this presentation basically calls out the fact that it may not, it may be something that you call out, the fact that you don't require any inspections to be waived or any contingencies to be waived, that you're gladly accepting contingencies. And that is the definition of differentiation. You are willing to do something that other buyers and sellers may not be willing to do. Okay. This is one we talked about a few minutes ago that I alluded to. Instead of advertising on the price, advertise the payment schedule. Create your, based off of the rates that are still historically low. They're not historically low compared to 6 months ago, but they are historically low compared to 5 years ago. And rents are still historically high. So help the buyers know what they can afford by purchasing a house versus renting, by focusing on the monthly payment rather than the overall price of the home. So you can actually put that into some of your advertising and marketing. And working with a lender like Greg, or if you've got somebody else to put together some net sheets. I know Greg does this quite a bit, whether it be the net sheets or whether it be a rate sheet, to show what a payment for this particular home would look like for a 30-year fixed or an ARM or a 2-1 buy down or a 5-1 buy down. Those are all possibles, and Greg would be happy to work with us on any of these, by the way. Couple other points. Just about every FHA, VA, and USDA mortgages are assumable. And someone assuming a mortgage and a rate in a market where the rates are high is actually not a bad thing. And it is becoming much more prevalent where people can indeed get assumable loans or assume somebody else's mortgage. So that is a possibility that should be explored. It's not very prevalent, I will tell you, but if it is the one thing that'll get a deal to go through, then I would be doing it, and I would explore those options. And the last thing is, I have never been a big fan. I don't think the brochure boxes out in front of your sign do a whole lot of good, but if it is something that will help you save face with your seller, I would not be hesitant to do anything of that nature to help them. All right, everybody. Any questions, burning issues, other concerns, whether it be about any of the topics we covered today or anything else for that matter?
Can you talk a little bit about the assumable loans? I've heard about it, but can you talk about the circumstances and how you would even go about that?
So I can tell you, I know just enough to be dangerous. The FHA and VA loans can be assumed. So it would become an issue of they would have to qualify. So like I'm a veteran, I have my VA eligibility, but I can look at another home that was bought with a VA loan and assume that person's loan. Essentially, we would account for the balance in the difference of what he owes versus what I owe. But essentially, I would assume his loan and inherit his interest rate. from back when he had it. So the reason that was developed was back in, the day when interest rates were very volatile and people could, right now interest rates are what, 7%, but there's no doubt some veterans out there that are probably ready to sell their VA backed mortgage home that have a loan that's 2.5 or 2.75. If I was to want to buy that person's house, wouldn't it make sense for me to assume his lower interest rate mortgage? I would still have to qualify and meet all the qualification criteria, but it is possible to assume his loan and basically take over his payments with that lower interest rate. Does that make sense?
So if it's a FHA and does that or even a VA, does that mean that they can still go someplace else and get a new one?
They're eligible. So VA eligibility is one at a time. So that veteran that might be giving up his 2.5% loan for me to assume it would be giving up his VA eligibility, but the VA eligibility criteria changes all the time. I don't know what it is today. It could be that there's eligible for another VA mortgage, but it also could be that they're not. I would say we need to get with Greg Janicki and confirm that before we know for sure. Okay. All right, everybody, we are just about out of time. If nobody has any additional questions, we'll go ahead and end it here today. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.